Hello, welcome to the first of my response videos as part of this video blog. I've already put out some introductory videos introducing the three main areas that I work with, which are craniosacral biodynamics, continuum movement, and prenatal and birth therapy. And in those videos, I invited questions. My intention for this series, this video blog, is for each video from now on to basically be about responding to questions that have been submitted. So please keep them coming. I've had a few and I'm ready to start. So I hope you enjoy this and learn from it, that it benefits you. That's my real intention. I'd like to start with the first question that was posed, and this one was in response to my introductory video on continuum movement. In case you haven't seen it or haven't heard about continuum, continuum is really quite amazing, I think, method of inquiring into our fluid nature. It's been developed by Emily Conrad for almost 50 years. She recently passed away, unfortunately, in April. And the inquiry continues as we learn about the continuum movement teachers, learn about how to really more fully embody what we learned from Emily, which has to do with coming into our natural fluidity, which includes resilience, the ability, if you think about the ability of water to adapt to whatever it meets. A river finds its path through meeting obstacles and finding its way around them or sometimes through them. We are made up mostly of fluid, and Emily wanted to know why and how we can access that more fully. So just to say briefly, in Continuum, we use different kinds of breaths, sounds that are vocalized sounds, usually directed into the tissues of our body, and movement, which is often very slow, subtle, movement that can help to reconnect us with our fluidity, our natural fluid state. And we also use awareness. I tend to look at continuum as being more of a mindfulness practice than anything else. So the question that came up first was a question about how I introduced continuum in a way, because I said that it's a bit weird. And for those of you who know me, you know that that could only be a positive comment, even though some people consider weird to be not a positive thing. That's very relevant, I believe, to the intention of continuum, which in a way is to unsettle us in our status quo, our habitual way of doing things. Emily talked about that quite a bit. So weird, you can think about weird and wonderful. And for those of you who know me again, you know that I am absolutely in love with continuum and see it as just an incredible tool and support and resource for us in our modern world. And my whole intention in talking about it and teaching it is to support you and others in being able to drink of this fluidity that we are more fully. So you can assume that I mean weird in a positive way. However, the question was two-part. One was questioning if it was wise to use the word weird in introducing continuum because it might put some people off, which is definitely not my intention. And the other is, would Emily have thought to use the word weird? So interestingly enough, I was just about to go to a continuum teachers meeting when I received these questions. And so I found myself asking other teachers, Continuum teachers, about the use of the word weird. And for the most part, people seem to like it and agree with me that it would apply. Some of us looked up the word weird to see, well, what does it really mean? Because it can be interpreted in different ways. And some of the words associated with weird are unusual, which definitely applies to Continuum, and I can say more about that. Mysterious. There is a quality and aspect of touching and diving into the mystery, the unknown in Continuum. And that relates to not just staying with what we know and what we have habituated ourselves to, our patterns, where we're more rigid. But in order to be truly fluid, in a way, we need to die to the last moment, to let go of our last moment in order to fully embrace this moment. Just like the river does. I don't think the river is thinking about that there were a lack of rocks a moment ago when it encounters a rock. It doesn't have to think about that. It just knows how to engage with whatever's there in the moment. And we have that ability because we're like the river. We are fluid also. So mysterious. We don't know necessarily how to do that. We don't necessarily know intellectually how to meet the challenges of the moment. And yet there's a level at which there is a deep knowing within our bodies, a somatic knowing. Somatic comes from the word soma, which means body. Continuum supports that. It's all about reconnecting with that in a way through our own fluidity, fluid intelligence, if you will. Emily talked about biointelligence. We have a natural biointelligence. One of the words that was associated with weird when we looked it up was inhuman, or not quite human. I forget exactly how it was said. But that's also an important aspect of Continuum, where we want to, in a way, tap in with our deepest natural humanness, but we also want to go beyond the limitations of being human. So in Continuum, we acknowledge there's a continuum of being between different species. We can borrow from other species some of the skills and behaviors that they have and apply them or discover how they might be useful to us. So, for example, in Continuum, we sometimes will move our arms in something like this, imitating wings of a bird or fins of a fish, so that we can begin to access what birds and fish have that we don't. Or maybe we do on a deeper level. If we have evolved from fish, for example, we probably have fishedness within us. And Continuum can help us to access what's useful of being like a fish or being like a bird or whatever creature it may be. So there's a quality of weirdness there in terms of it not being strictly human, not being limited by the human. One of the words that came up in the definition of weird was supernatural. And we agreed that that doesn't necessarily apply to Continuum. In a way, Continuum is very much about coming into the natural. We live lives in our modern Western world that are not very natural at all. They're very linear and compressed in terms of time and space. And our tissues, Emily found, get more narrow and dense as we try to fit ourselves into the time-space continuum. One of the questions that she used to ask is, if we were not bound in time, would we be susceptible? If we were not bound in time, would we be susceptible? In Meaning, would we be susceptible to the various conditions around us? Like temperature is a condition. It's winter as I'm speaking this. It's a bit cold in the room. As I'm bound in this time space situation, I react more to the cold. But if I can find a way to expand my awareness beyond that, as we do in Continuum, I might discover an inner warmth. I may have a different way of being in relationship to that condition. But there are many other conditions that we are affected by, like our histories. Even what our ancestors went through have an imprint on our cells. A trauma in our history that hasn't been resolved that tends to keep affecting us. What we find is that in Continuum, as we get more fluid, our patterns related to those histories start to melt, and we start to find ourselves being freer, to be more creative and adaptive and resilient in the moment. So, interestingly, I discovered one of the meanings of weird, the original, I think it was the original meaning of weird, had to do with controlling destiny. Controlling destiny. And I think that may be something we can do through Continuum. Rather than being completely at the mercy of the conditions of our lives, there is something we can do so that we can meet those conditions more creatively, more perhaps effectively, more healthily. We can meet them with health, and we can move through whatever is presented to us in a way that enhances our health and our energy and our aliveness rather than depleting them. That's one of the effects that I've certainly seen from Continuum. So, is Continuum weird? I'm afraid I have to say yes. I do want to acknowledge, however, that many people have negative connotations with that word. So maybe there are other words that would be more appropriate or more useful or more welcoming to use, like unusual. Continuum is definitely unusual. People often say, well, it's kind of like this or that or the other, a bit like yoga, a bit like qigong, tai chi, Feldenkrais. There's all kinds of practices that it is maybe a bit like. There are overlaps. The Continuum is also quite unique, and it challenges us, again, to go beyond what we're used to go beyond our habits and patterns. And that often isn't comfortable, even though Continuum practice can and often does take us into ecstatically pleasurable states. That may be a challenge for us too, to be able to really allow ourselves to experience such intense pleasure. Because in our modern Western world, we're not really supposed to have pleasure. We're not really even supposed to have bodies, but I'll talk more about that another time. But if we allow ourselves to be altered away from our habits and patterns, to begin to melt what is limiting and restraining us and open to what I like to call our original potential, the potential that is still there waiting for us, our natural state, we may encounter the unknown, the mysterious, and often as humans we have fear about that. And so we see it as a negative thing. It's something that we address often in teaching Continuum, because we are challenged to move beyond what's comfortable, to move beyond our comfort zone. So if that appeals to you as a portal to something else, as a gateway to being more fully alive and present and creative in your life, then I invite you to keep checking in on these blogs, these blog videos, and to find a Continuum teacher if you don't have one already. Find some classes, watch some videos, and let yourself begin to dive into the ocean of life more fully. And if what I've said today has raised any questions for you, please let me know. You can either send me an email, Cherionna@cherionna.com, and that's a good way to do it if you don't want to be identified, if you want to remain anonymous. Or you can submit a question directly on this blog as a comment, and I'll do my very best to respond to the questions. I really love hearing from you, and I'm really seeing this as a dialogue. So please join in, and thank you for listening. I wish you a very fluid journey for the rest of your day. Thank you.